Here, the Ohio and Mississippi mingle their waters in the midst of deep and ancient forests, where the eye wanders over vast and swampy woods. They have much the same growth on their banks, and yet they have a character very unlike each other. The Ohio is calm and placid, and except when full, its waters are limpid. The face of the Mississippi is turbid. The river seems always in wrath, tearing away the banks on one hand with gigantic fury to deposit the spoils in another place.
The two biggest rivers in North America, Cairo ought to be the biggest city in the United States. And look at it.
Cairo was a part of the national picture.
People all over the world will tell you, oh yes, I know where Cairo, Illinois is. It's at the confluence of the two great rivers.
We don't have this stuff no more. It's just dead.
It looks like, there'd been a war or something.
This country gone. It's gone. This is it.
This was the place. This was the place. But the way, things are now, we have really gone down quite a bit. But, I haven't given up. I still have hope for Cairo. I still have hope for Cairo.
Well, Cairo is really not a bad place to live. There's not a better place to live that I know of. It's just a financial thing. You could raise your kids here better. You don't have to worry about some of the things that happen in the cities. Some of that stuff don't even happen down here. So, your kids, they get out and they get to see more than just bricks and skyscrapers and all that. They get to see wildlife and different things like that some kids don't even get a chance to see. So kids should go, to small towns, rural areas, where they can see a whole different way of life, a whole different world.
Could have been the most prosperous town between here and Chicago because we had everything here going for it. We had the river, the rails, everything that we really needed here to make a town out of it. But once it started down, it just didn't seem like it was any turnaround. It just kept it going. It's a shame. There's people that's left from here 50 years ago that comes back through here now, and they look at it and they sit and cry about it. I've seen this 8th Street here so busy back in the late 40s, early 50s, that it was so crowded that you'd have to get off the sidewalk, be courtesy to let the ladies get by.
But I'm not for sure that Cairo actually existed the way that people remember it and see it anyhow. It depends upon one's perspective. You talk to a local white resident and they see it as Mayberry, which you guys might not recognize being from England. It was a TV series that took place in the 1960s here, which was basically a little white community where everything was perfect and everything went right. And that's how a lot of people saw Cairo. They remember going to the swimming pool, they remember playing baseball, they remember the park on Saturday night and concerts and things like that. And they recall those things fondly and they want to see it again. The only problem is, while that was going on, there was a whole different part of society right there in the same community that could not experience any of those things. They could not go to the swimming pool in the community. They could not even eat in a restaurant. So, people have different memories of the community. They want it back a certain way, but if it went back that way, it wouldn't be so good for everybody. So I don't think it will ever come back, and I'm not for sure it was ever there in the first place.
Cairo, the southernmost city in Illinois, occupies the tip of the narrow peninsula where the nation's two greatest rivers, the Ohio and Mississippi, join for their final flow into the Gulf of Mexico at New Orleans. The Cairo Chamber of Commerce brochures refer to the rich history of the city deep in the Southland, where magnolia vies with mimosa. In 1967, Cairo exploded with a rash of fire bombings over a 2-day period, causing thousands of dollars in damage, apparently as a result of increasing racial tension. The situation in Cairo will be described by many of the people actually involved, and, to the extent possible, in their own words. This program is not designed to take sides or to offer a solution, but is presented to shed as much light as possible on the background, current situation, and the people involved in the problems of Cairo, city in turmoil.
Chicago Tribune, April 26, 2011. Downstate Illinois under flash flood watch. As heavy rain continues to pelt the Midwest, preparations are underway to deal with rising rivers, creeks, and streams. Governor Pat Quinn has issued a disaster proclamation and calls it a very difficult and potentially dangerous situation.
Some of them we could go in and grow. Yeah.
But most of them,
you would treat it like you were black when you go into business, place of business. That's racism. It was a time where you had to go to the back door. We as blacks had to go to the back door to be served. I mean, you know, that which happened in various other places in the United States, but that can bring any city down.
At the junction of the two rivers lies a breeding place of fever and death, a dismal swamp on which the half-built houses rot away, a hotbed of disease, a grave uncheered by any gleam of promise, a place without one single quality in earth or air or water to commend it. Such is this dismal Cairo. Charles Dickens, American Notes, 1842.
I think it's good to talk about history and what goes on in the history of Cairo back then. Now, I don't brush it off like, okay, that's just history, oh well. But, I mean, Cairo was really a nice looking place back then when my grandma was showing me pictures and had theaters and all that other kind of stuff. I would love to relive them days if I could see it. I can't believe the way, Cairo it is now and the way it is back then. Cairo looked like a ghost town now. It looked like it was just booming with lights, fame, glamour. The best thing you can imagine happened in Cairo.
Shines every night, where the balmy breezes are blowing, where the rippling waters are flowing.
This is actually the reason why people come from all over the United States to eat here. This is an old family recipe. This pit has probably cooked 1 million pounds of meat. It's done the old-fashioned way. We burn the fire down in the corner there. Then you take your coals, chop them up real good, throw them back under the meat. And it's all natural seasoning with oak, hickory, and ash blend the wood. And it's awful hot today to have to do this. This town has got all the amenities. You got the two largest rivers in the United States. You got rail, you've got interstate highway. This should be a big metropolis. It was just staved off when it was trying to grow, and once you stave a town off from growing, then it takes a long time to come back.
Yeah, people always go on about what happened to Cairo, and I just basically tell them the invention of the airplane and the automobile really hurt Cairo. It's been on a slow decline ever since. You know, just a whole bunch of drops in the bucket. It's working against Cairo. It's still rich in history, but it is kind of a forgotten town. A lot of people don't even know where it is, and at one time people all over the world knew where it was.
You know, again, this gets back to the big question of what happened to Cairo. Why didn't it become successful when it was at this confluence of the two largest rivers on the North American continent? If you were to pull out a map and simply look at it, that's where you'd want to be as far as business is concerned. You had a gateway to the west. You had the Ohio River going all the way out to the Atlantic. You had the Mississippi River that turned into the Missouri and went almost all the way to the Pacific. It controlled a lot of the commerce for everywhere. Cairo was pretty much a little Las Vegas. It was Sin City. You had all this gaming and prostitution there, and people coming there to spend lots of money. So a lot of money from all over the place was flowing into Cairo. And when the town fathers wanted to clear it up, they ran out a lot of the illicit commerce to clean up the community. But that illicit commerce was commerce, and it was a big part of what the town was running on.
Part of southern Illinois, the bottom 60 miles of territory has always been considered to be part of the Delta region, both geologically and geographically. So it's akin to the South in many ways. The wealth in Cairo first came about as riverboat captain and others who settled there because of its location at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi. It was a major export-import station. So they brought a lot of wealth with them, but they were also primarily people from the South. And as they settled in Cairo and built up the wealth of that city, they also brought those attitudes from the South with them in terms of the racial divisions.
So we're a southern city, there's no doubt about it. And a northern state. It makes it very unique. A lot of the people that came here came from the South. It's true of the black community too. They all came up from the South. But at the same token, that's not bad. I think southern people are much more hospitable than northern people. They just tend to be more friendly, more neighborly. You can say that on racial politics that they were more segregated, but I don't know that it wasn't the same in the North. They just weren't exposed to as many black people in the North.
It's a southern thing.
I guess
I think about how Freddie used to tell me that he grew up in Chattanooga, and he talked about how they were more racist up here than they were in the South.
My cousin George, he came to visit, and he said a black person was walking down the same side of the street as Zetra, my grandmother, and his mother and grandmother, and the next thing you knew, they're crossing the street, and George was like, what's that about? He was from Chicago.
Oh, okay.
It didn't happen in Chicago. Everything was, he said there was no place like Cairo.
Yeah.
The cotton is no longer grown. You have to go south probably 50 miles at least to get into cotton fields. But there was a time, remember Harry Hall?
Oh yeah.
Him and his brother Finus were two older black men when we grew up. But we called him Grandpa's brother because they just did everything together.
Well, I thought when I was really little they were brothers.
Yeah. And
one was black and one was white,
yeah,
but I believed they were brothers. I didn't see why not.
Back in the heyday, they were known for having the best cotton ground in the county. They would pick it by hand still and haul it down to Cairo to the cotton gin. The kitchen table, for a tablecloth, they had newspapers. And we sold them 200 bushel of corn one time. And Dad went in and Harry said, Gordon said, let me pay you for that. And Dad, you know, you can pay me whenever. Didn't know if they really even had the money or not. They raised up the newspapers on that for their tablecloth, and there must have been $3,000 under there. That's where they kept their money. Like I say, I mean, we grew up that way. We just called him Grandpa's brother. We didn't distinguish black from white out where we were from.
Yeah.
Cairo is very much a southern city, and it's very strange. It's a southern city in a northern state. There are magnolia trees, and the people talk of the magnolia trees, and you have an aristocracy here in Cairo. In order to preserve some sort of a southern heritage, it had to isolate itself, and they've tried to preserve very much of a southern air in Cairo, a sort of an old southern air, we might say.
They have their beliefs. It's kind of like a caste system in a sense. And there was anyway, not much anymore. But people had their place.
We're a poor county. We're also at the jumping off point. We get the poor people from the south, both white and colored, that move in here because of our better payments under aid, things of that sort. We're getting more than our share, let's put it that way.
The Midwest did not have very many progressive states offering very many welfare programs or help programs for any of its citizenry. Illinois was a little bit more progressive than the states around it. And so you had a new influx of minorities in the 1940s, the late 1940s, early 1950s, moving into Cairo to receive public benefits there because the state was offering it, and their states did not. Then you come into the 1960 racial problems that we had, and the fire was basically lit from that.
Fire struck the Hudson Warehouse complex early on the morning of June 26, 1969.
This is Mitch Ferris for Channel 8 News in Cairo, Illinois. We're talking to Ira Hudson III, the Vice President of Hudson Warehouses Incorporated, the scene last night of the 6th major fire in Cairo in the past 10 days. Do you have any idea of what caused the fire?
Heat, intense heat. As it stands now, you have a bunch of militant black men who are terrorizing not only the white population by their firebombs and things of that sort, but they're terrorizing their own people.
There's a number of factors that have contributed to the downfall of Cairo. A lot of people look at it and say, well, the 1960s did it. No, the 1960s were, if anything, the final nail in the coffin to things, but they weren't the spark that started it. The geography was. The cleanup of the community by the town fathers. The 1940s, where we started the pilot projects for drawing in people for public housing. The 1950s and 1960s were additional benefits were provided, and people were pulling into Cairo from all over the place. Different people than had been there before, and the locals resented it, and they rebelled against it, and therefore you had the racial tensions again. These are not justifications, but they are answers for what happened.
Is there a future in Cairo for black people at all? The future depends on us as a whole black people, which we can do. Now in our downtown community, we have a boycott going strong for us. And if this lasts out, I think 3 more weeks, maybe the white man might listen to and might meet some of our demands, which we have laid before him. So far, he won't listen to our demands, but if the boycott continues to go on strong, maybe he will listen. No Negroes buy from the white man. We do not shop in the community which the white man controls.
You want to see what greed and corruption will do to a community? You take a good look at Cairo.
This whole area down through here was just nothing but business and busy, wasn't it, George?
Yep.
These vacant lots were all businesses.
You had a tavern on the corner.
You had the brokerage, and that was right up here, wasn't it, George?
The brokerage was right here, I think.
I thought it was right here. A hardware store. Then you had your J.J. Blum's and P&Hurst, that was right up here.
You had Famous and Bar right across the street.
Montgomery Ward and Sears was all up in here. You had everything here. When I was a kid in the mid-'60s, this right here was the busiest spot right here on this corner, wasn't it, George?
Yeah, it used to be a Curtis and May studio right there on the corner.
Yep. And then right here, that old man had that Model T truck, sold hamburgers and all that right here.
Yep.
Remember the hamburger stand?
Whataburger?
Yeah.
Yeah, Whataburger was there right by the side station.
Yep.
Oh my
You know why it was so
God,
good, don't
those
you?
greasy hamburgers.
The grease was 105 years old. He never changed it.
Oh,
That's why it was
really?
good.
Bowling alley. They had
Yes,
the movie
with the
theater.
skating rink.
Yeah, skating rink.
Yeah, because oh
Ice
man,
cream.
what was it? Butter pecan ice cream with strawberry topping.
Seriously?
Yes.
Then all these businesses that fell in here were all Montgomery Ward, Sears, what else, George?
Booker's Garage.
The Holy Ghost Barber Shop. Forgot about that. You remember that? It was
I don't
on commercial
remember
too. Yeah, it was called the Holy Ghost Barber Shop.
Of course, here's your Rose and Burfords. They were in business for probably 100 years, weren't they, George?
Oh, a good long while. This used to be the Illinois Central Railroad Depot here.
They had a big turntable right here, big massive
Yep,
turntable.
My dad worked there.
What was this, George?
There was an old warehouse used to be in there that shipped.
Hey, babe, let me holler back at you. We're doing this documentary down here.
Years ago, when I was going to Cairo, that was the most vibrant street you could imagine. It was filled with people all the time, even coming from Kentucky and Missouri to shop. There were clubs down on the riverfront. I can't tell you how many times I've stood in one of those clubs and, 10 o'clock at night holding hands, singing "We Shall Overcome," and feeling like we were going to make a difference and that there was a possibility, and it just never manifested itself.
Chicago Tribune, April 30th, 2011. Rising rivers forcing a decision on whether to save Cairo. Tensions are rising like the swollen Ohio and Mississippi rivers, squeezing this flood-threatened town. A legal battle, tinged with racial overtones, has erupted over a plan to rescue Cairo by blasting a 2-mile breach in a Mississippi River levee and flooding thousands of acres of Missouri farmland.
Early settlers came here, thought the area reminded them of Egypt and the Nile Valley. So they started, a lot of the towns are named after Egypt, which would be Cairo, which is not pronounced Cairo. You ask anybody, it's Cairo. Early on, people traveled by rivers. A lot of different cultures merged right here, and I think that's why we're a little different than everyone else.
We judged that 3 nights more would fetch us to Cairo at the bottom of the Illinois, where the Ohio River comes in, and that was what we was after. We would sail a raft, get on a steamboat, and go way up the Ohio amongst the free states, and then be out of trouble. And Jim sings out, "We safe, Huck, we safe. Jump up and crack your heels. That's the good old Cairo at last, I just knows it." Most of the immigration came from the south, and they followed the rivers. About 4 geographical areas that meet right here. There's so many different kinds of plants that don't grow any farther north than here, and then you got plants that don't grow any farther south than here, and they all kind of meet at one place. There's not only plants, but there's certain critters around that they're only in this one certain spot, and they kind of overlap the range. This is the farthest north there's any native stands of ball cypress. I mean, you're used to seeing them in Louisiana and Mississippi and along the coast and places like that. And there's a lot of things that have drifted down from the northern parts and wound up right in here where these 2 rivers meet. You'll find just a lot of stuff here that you don't find anywhere else. You just don't find it anywhere else.
The entire American experience was encapsulated in this town. It's all here. The north and the south dividing line is right where we sit. The river confluence just down the street here, that's our Rocky Mountains, man. It's a powerful, moving place for me. I could sit out there for days and watch those rivers. All the flora and the fauna, all the culture, the whole American experience went down right in this community. And if you're an American and you find the Grail, you're drawn in. there's a little bit of truth in everybody's story. Okay? White community says boycotts close down the businesses. A little bit of truth in that story. African Americans say we had to use the boycotts to do it. Absolutely, the only weapon they had to work with. People will tell you in the white community, oh, these agitators came in and they had nowhere else to go after the civil rights struggles were done all over the country. We had to come here to keep our feathers up, and that there's some truth in that. So what I found here was that there's no literal black and white truth. You can't boil this into a 5-second soundbite.
That when a community faces problems, we have to face up to them. I know of no community in the state where the problems are as intense as they are in Cairo. Some kind of a confrontation was inevitable when you were drifting apart. The only meaningful dialogue you had, for example, really was between the storekeeper and the janitor, between the housewife and her maid, and this isn't dialogue of equals, and this has to take place, and it has to take place in any community. Any community that doesn't have it is a community that's headed for trouble.
Well, naturally, being at the confluence of the two rivers here, where some cities can move 4 directions, we can only move 1 direction, which is primarily north. And I believe that Cairo does have good possibilities if we can get this situation worked out. Cairo is my town now, and we all should be striving to make it a better town, whether it's through tourism or everything put together to make this a better town. We've got to stay here. We can't give it away.
People here are very worried. Soon there may be a black mayor. Soon there may be a black city council. Can you imagine an old southern town having, with the white aristocracy, having a black mayor or a black city council?
This is my hometown, and I love this place here. I was retired. I retired in '98. I ran prisons for 33 years. And I retired, but then I got to seeing all the negative stuff and the bickering, so I thought, well, I can provide better leadership than what we had. I had administrative skills, I had leadership skills, I had people skills. The city is 150 years old. They never had a black mayor. I had the first one. But I'm the mayor for the white, black, Mexican, Puerto Rican, homosexuals, or whatever. You know, I'm the people's mayor. And that's what I want to do. I love people. I'm a people lover. It doesn't make any difference what color you are or whatever. I got just as many white votes as I did black. And I don't consider myself a politician. I just consider myself a leader.
You can't judge them on the color of their skin. You have to judge them on the merits of how they treat you. It doesn't bother me that we have a black mayor or a white mayor or what, it's what can you do for this town.
Town ain't bad, it's just something needs to be reworked on, I think so. Need something that gets this town going.
Okay, we're going over here. We're going to take you over to what I call the Badlands. We're coming up on Sycamore Street, the main drag, 51 that runs through town, the center of town here. And I'm going to take you fellas over here into the Badlands. It's not a safe place to live. It's not even a good place to even visit anymore down here, as you can well see. I lived here when I was a little bitty fella, because like I told you fellas, I come up poor. I wasn't like George, I didn't come up rich.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry, I got you confused with somebody else.
Yeah, you got me definitely confused.
Anyway, I lived right here when I was 8 years old. The house is gone now, there's a little duplex there. There was 9 of us kids who lived here. We lived all over this town. What we would do, Nick, we were a rambunctious bunch of kids. We were kind of heathens ourselves. We were white, I guess you call white heathens, but my brothers would tear up a house. We'd all get in there, and Mom and Dad would have to find another house. So we basically lived all over town back in then. We're coming up on the bad, worst part of town now. This is where the blacks lived, the Pyramid Courts. This is where the black guy, during the time when he was on leave out of the service, was walking through here. and was shot. In my heart, I know who pretty well done that to keep the shit stirred up in this town, and that would be what they called the White Hats. Y'all remember me mentioning the White Hats? It was a group of white guys, basically like the Ku Klux Klan, you know what I'm saying? And they formed a group, what they called the White Hats. And they kept shit started down here, kept it rolling, kept it moving, kept it stirred up.
Mr. Level, you're the chairman of the Committee of 10 Million, commonly known as the White Hats. What's the purpose of the organization?
The Cairo chapter of the Committee of 10 Million, commonly referred to as the White Hats, is composed entirely of a roster of 600 Cairo citizens who have volunteered to serve as deputies for either the sheriff or the chief of police of Cairo in time of emergency declared by the mayor. Now that is what the organization is for, is to help in case of emergency.
But I remember when the White Hats set up on our front porch, we were under, I guess, martial law or curfew, and I guess it was state police here, but the White Hats were sitting on my front stoop. I remember that, right around the corner. And my aunt marched through the house with her shotgun and she said, "Get off my porch now." And they left.
I can remember my mom saying, you know, they would let the kids out of the dance late that evening, and they would have to stand outside the building and watch them walk back to the projects because there was a man on the corner, a white man on the corner with his arms crossed and his shotgun across his arm.
Did he have his white hat on?
He'd stand there with his arms crossed.
Do you
and
remember
the
what the
shotgun.
white hats look like?
I don't.
Well, Dad told me that they were just like construction hats. That they,
Oh, okay.
because I envisioned pointy hats.
Yeah.
No, they were like a construction hat, and there were over 200, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Dad was one.
Isn't that something?
To me, it all fit hand in glove. The people who had the wealth controlled all the power, made all the political decisions, and at least during those times, they were not interested in breaking that caste system or creating any sort of racial healing at all. It was much to their advantage to have the system work the way it did. The divisions that primarily had characterized the South with respect to race were all brought together right there in Cairo in the two different groups. And there was no attempt at bringing the community together or trying to find the broad middle ground where both sides might reach some agreement. Not at all.
All right, that boycott is on, and they're going to stay on, and they're going to be on. All right, give me one on that. All right.
The White Hats ran Cairo. They were white people, your upper crust people that ran the community. But yeah, they could get away with probably murder. You remember yesterday when I told you the blacks weren't allowed downtown to shop? Were they, George?
Oh.
They weren't allowed in town. I'll show you the parameter that they had to stay in, and they had the little corner grocery stores. That's where they shopped. They weren't welcome downtown at all.
I used to even have a black nanny there that when I was real little, and I got to call her mom. She was taking care of me that much. My mother and dad had to sit down and talk things over, and I had to let her go because
that was the Piggly Wiggly, a big grocery store there. All right, like I said, I've lived all over this town. I'll show you where I lived during the worst of it. 68, 69. Right here, there's still the shotgun houses left. One of them, we lived right beside it. There used to be an identical shotgun house right here. This is where your poor people lived, in shotgun houses. The reason they call them shotgun houses is because they're straight through. You open the front door and you see the back door. All this is back in here is called Poplar Street. This is where the blacks lived too. This was a poor black area back in here. That one night in particular I was telling you about, we were sitting here. We had a picture window right here in the front room. And I was watching the Outer Limits or the Twilight Zone. Back in the day, that was scary stuff. Anyway, we're watching TV and all of a sudden, boom! Here comes this doggone window shattering. and I'm already watching Twilight Zone. That scared me to death. 57 Chevrolet my dad had given me because I was close to getting my driver's license. It was parked right here. They shot it full of hose. Pap, 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 pap. And I come out here, run around, see what was going on. Mr. Busby come flying around the corner. Somebody shooting. Anyway, he come out, and that's when he hands me this 30-06 banana clip. He said, "Here, boy." I grabbed it, and he said, "That's protect yourself." He said, "It's war." And Cunningham Lumber Company right over here was on fire. The whole doggone sky was just red with flames. I got behind the mulberry tree, scrunched down. The Busbys were over there hiding behind that right there. Actually, it's still there. That block formation there. And I'm sitting down there, and he's running up behind me. He said, "Did you see I don't want to use that word." And I said, "I seen a couple running around." He said, "Well, they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you. You're going to have to shoot them. You're going to have to shoot them." I said, I can't kill nobody, but I'm a kid, you know. Anyway, about that time, here comes some little 18, 19-year-old black boy running across the parking lot, and it looked like he had a firebomb. They were bad about making them Molotov cocktails. And he had something in his hand, looked like he was fixing to do innings. And I'm sitting there, and he said, "Shoot that!" He screamed at me, "Shoot that! Shoot that!" And I put that 30-06 on him. I'll never forget it. And I went, "You shoot him." He went, "Oh, no, I don't shoot guns." I said, I gave Mr. Busby his gun back. About that time, the cops come flying through here, and they stopped right there. He got out, and he said, "You got a gun?" I said, "Well, I had one." He said, "Well, you better get one." The whole town was crazy. The whole town was crazy, I'm telling you. The whole town just went plumb nuts, turned into martial law. It wasn't the same people. They acted different. There was hatred, much hatred going on. It was a crazy, crazy, stupid place.
You become aware of the tremendous division based upon race in that city, which may have been more prolific than even the larger cities of the state of Illinois and the nation. People have to want to, create a bridge over those divides and the artificial boundaries that traditionally divide people, whether they're race or religion, whatever they are. They've just always been prominent in that community.
Well, irregardless, as bad as this area is, it's still my home. I hate to say it, but I love this area. I love this area. Isn't that pitiful to say? But it's home. I mean, it's where I was born and raised. I know everybody down here. It's home.
I love Cairo with all my heart. These are my daylilies. They were at the back door of my parents' old farmhouse. The pioneers took these flowers with them west because they were one of the few flowers that would survive. I'm just going to be out in my garden planting more flowers, bringing hope where I can. I see a very spiritual way here because people here are very economically depressed. I work for a not-profit, and we deal with a lot of homeless, a lot of people who are really down and out. And, it kind of brings some meaning to your life when you can help people. And I have to say, I understand that situation because I also was homeless. My building that I had in Chicago, a brick 2-flat worth $250,000, was literally stolen from me by the bank. I owed $18,000 on it when it was foreclosed on. Now I have a roof over my head, and I appreciate things a lot more. That's what that sort of thing does. It makes you appreciate what you do have and not really worry about what you don't have.
New York Times, April 30th, 2011. Levee breach moves one step closer. The rivers have continued to swell toward historic levels, prompting Mayor Judson Childs of Cairo to issue a mandatory evacuation of the city.
Cairo is going to bounce back because people in Cairo are people of faith. And I don't think that you can find people of a greater faith than people right here in this area. And I'm not just speaking for myself, but I'm speaking for the majority of the people in Cairo. We are people of faith. Hey, how you doing, Ann?
Fine, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
That's the reason why I can rise up with thanksgiving in my heart. Thank God. Yeah.
As you've been walking around, I'm sure you've seen the devastation and the poverty and maybe a sense of hopelessness. But what we see working with community members is a great sense of hope. We run youth mission trips. So this summer is our 9th summer in Cairo, Illinois. And we live down at the church. 5 of us staff welcome about 60 to 70 youth here. And they spend the week working with kids at Kids Club. They do some housework like we're going to do here. We're going to do some painting. They also run a sports camp for kids in town, and it's all Christian based. So through all this work, we're spreading God's love and just trying to bring joy to this community because it definitely deserves some love here.
Chicago Daily Tribune, November 12th, 1909. The fury of the mob has been growing in intensity since early Wednesday night, when Sheriff Davis smuggled Will James, the Negro lynched tonight, out of town to save his life. James was held for Miss Pelly's murder and was caught with the sheriff and a deputy yesterday afternoon and brought back to Cairo. James was lynched in the most prominent square of the city, the rope being wound over the public arch at 8th and Commercial Streets.
A young 3-year-old girl found the body of Anna Pelly. Town fathers got together and they called in 4 teams of dogs, and the dogs quickly there went to a woman's house called Loving Green. Loving, Loving Green was her name. And she was a black woman who had held a house of ill repute. She gave testimony that William Froggy James was there that evening. And so they arrested William Froggy James and put him in the courthouse. That's really when word started getting out strongly throughout the community that someone was in the jail for the murder, and that he might have been a minority. The crowds grew so large, they were coming from all outside the area, and they were being whipped up by locals as well. The sheriff realized he had to do something, so the sheriff took Froggy James and left, got on the train, and headed north. A group, possibly a lynch mob, had stolen a train in Anna, Illinois, and was taking it down the same set of tracks, south towards him. So he jumped the train with Froggy James and tried to make his way through the countryside. But the mob caught him about 4 a.m. the next morning, beat up the sheriff, and took him and Froggy James back to Cairo. Now, at this time, you have to understand the the terrible things that were happening in Cairo while this lynch mob was going. They were very mad that Froggy James was not in the courthouse any longer or in the jail cell. So they busted down the doors and they went in there because they tried to get the blacks out of the jail cells. Fortunately for the men inside, they were never able to get the jail cells open, except for one man, and that was for Albert Salzner, the white man. And he had been charged with killing his wife with an axe. So they took him out in the streets and they lynched him and tied him to a pole. When Froggy James was brought back down, there was a metal archway that went over the street on the corner of 8th and Commercial. They tied the rope around there and tried to raise James's body up into the air, but the rope broke. They tried it again and it broke again, so they shot him. And they shot him multiple times. They cut his head off, put it on a spike, set it on fire, burned various parts of the body, cut his heart out, cut it open to the little bitty pieces, sold it as souvenirs, and there are people still living in the community there that have different pieces of that heart still in formaldehyde. And there are pieces of the rope that was used. But while the head was sitting on a spit, on a pike, and while the body was laying there smoldering, you had long lines, long groups of women and children was marching by. The housewives would walk by with their 4- and 5-year-old kids, while the boys and the little girls would spit on the body and kick it. And it went on for hours.
New York Times, November 15th, 1909. The lynchings were the harvest of the seeds of lawlessness that have been sown in Cairo for years, said the Reverend A.S. Buchanan. I do not mean to say that the crime of lynching is ever justifiable, but Cairo's citizenship had to be aroused to a sense of its own responsibility by some great horror like this. I believe the tragedies of the last week will serve to awaken the city out of its lethargy. The Reverend George H. Babcock of the Church of the Redeemer Episcopalian said, "This defiance of law and order made the lynchings necessary for the infliction of justice."
This vigilante justice gave the town fathers basically a way of saying, we've cleaned up Cairo, we've done the right thing. One of the unique aspects of this crime is it probably had as much to do with the downfall of Cairo in the long run as anything else. There's no question about it that as they ran the illegal or illicit commerce that was going on in Cairo out, they ran out a lot of the jobs, and it hurt the entire community.
When I was in Congress, based upon the old Appalachian model of the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson, the war on poverty in America, we formed a Delta caucus because the Delta region of this country is now the poorest region of America. And Cairo is probably one of the poorest cities in that entire Delta region. We're seeing now money flowing from that Delta initiative to Cairo as well as other cities up and down that river. But gosh, I love my country deeply, and I believe this country is capable of overcoming anything. And we've come miles from where we were in the 60s when I was growing up, but there's still, people talk about President Obama today. Listen, a lot of the criticism of President Obama today comes from those old attitudes that just have never been given up. That's true. They don't want to admit that, but it's still there.
See right here, this picture right here went all over the world. This is me right here. We had that flag. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. This place was supposed to have been a big place, man, just like a little Chicago, But the whole downtown area, it was like this, like we could go there and spend our money, but we couldn't get jobs in those stores. That's why we formed a united front, in order to get the jobs and everything,
Now some people are still calling, wanting to know when the boycott is going to be over. The problem is this. We have black people who are asking for certain things, and we got a bunch of old white people like Peyton Burblin and Harry Bolin who are saying never. So, the boycott, don't even ask about it. It's still on, it'll be on, and we don't want to see you downtown. In fact, we recommend that you don't go downtown.
Once we started that economic boycott, the 5 millionaires that control the whole economics of Cairo, they pulled their money out and went elsewhere, you know. And we won the battle, but we lost the war because we didn't have nothing to replace the business that refused to hire blacks and everything else, you know. It was a lot of things that happened back then, you know. And you look around Cairo now, and you see, here we got 43 churches in Cairo. 43 churches. You know what I'm saying? And no jobs. No jobs.
Well, they all died. Kids moved out, looked for better work, you know, somewhere, because this town was slowly going downhill since 1972. And the blacks, that's what you want to call them, they just ruined it.
St. Louis Post-Dispatch, April 28, 2011. House Speaker Steve Tilley found himself in hot water this week after saying that he would rather flood an Illinois town than Missouri farmland. When Tilley was asked whether he would rather see Cairo or the farmland underwater, he told reporters, "Cairo. I've been there. Trust me. Cairo." "Have you been to Cairo?" he asked. "Okay then, you know what I'm saying."
Our next speaker, Harry L. Bolin, is a retired Major General in the Illinois National Guard, a longtime resident of Cairo, and the president of the Cairo Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, I think there'll always be a Cairo, and I don't agree with these sob sisters who come down here and call us a dying town. And you get a dozen of these agitators from out of town and keep them out of town, and Cairo will get along just fine. We always do.
A group of white women gathered at St. Mary's Park in Cairo to stage a march on City Hall. Suddenly, with whites massed on one side of the street and blacks massed on the other, taunts began to be shouted back and forth. Then a stone was hurled, and then more stones were thrown. State police and the Illinois Attorney General's office were issued weapons and moved out to patrol the deserted streets. A curfew was declared and an uneasy quiet settled over Cairo.
I don't know if my grandkids' generation is going to see it rooted out or not. I hope so. But, you know, Cairo just happens to be the most prolific example I know of our inability to dig down inside of us and consider who we really are as a country. Because I've spent so many years there. But they're not alone. It's cities. It may be a prototype for others who have never gotten rid of those attitudes, but it's certainly not alone.
But I think we have the finest people in the world, and I believe those people will end up working together and make this a great city. Otherwise, if we stand at our present position, then it only is one answer that I can say will happen, and that is that we will be a dead city.
The city of Cairo suffered another lost building on Monday night after this property on the 800 block of Commercial Street collapsed in flames. Over the last few years, there have been several fires of this magnitude throughout the city of Cairo, many of which have been considered arson. But authorities say this is not one of those cases. Police say when they arrived on scene, they removed Billy Fry, Alan Woodward, Bobby Woodworth, and Jeremy Connor from the building without injury. The men were stealing pipe with a cutting torch, and the building caught fire. In Cairo, Andy Waterman, News 3.
What a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. Oh, what a beautiful
Lord, I've sinned. I have messed up. Please forgive me. I invite you to come into my life right now and begin to make me the person I was meant to be.
The Reverend Larry L. Potts is pastor of the Cairo Baptist Church.
Reverend Potts, what in your opinion is the background of the present unrest in Cairo?
A community such as Cairo with a biracial makeup has the potential for problems.
I don't know where Larry came from. I don't think he originated out of Cairo. Seems like he moved in from somewhere else. But anyway, he had a church here, and he still got one now. It's called the Mighty Rivers down here. It's his church. In 1967, 68, somewhere along in there, Larry beat a black guy to death. He came in, the story has it, Larry came in and the black guy into his home, and the black guy was raping his wife. So Larry took a ball bat or some kind of object, I think it was a ball bat, and walked in and literally beat this guy to death. He killed him. Reverend Potts.
Now, there was difficulty of this same general type in 1967, was there not?
That is correct. There was racial outbreak here in Cairo, fire bombings, and so forth, brought about, I think, by the long, hot summer that was typical of our whole nation. And what is happening here in Cairo and in East St. Louis, in my opinion, is just part of what is a national conspiracy to destroy our society. And until this is solved, until law enforcement is given its teeth back again, and until people can live in peace and not in fear, I don't think there is any bridge for communication at all.
Have you ever wondered how it all happened?
Bishop said, this valley looks like one of dry bones. Cairo looks just like a valley of dry bones, where there's still too much separation. There's still too much selfishness. There's still not the drive to give everything you got. You can say with me, I am somebody. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may have been in jail, but I am somebody. I'm black. I'm beautiful. I'm God's child. Soul power. Soul power. Soul power. Soul power. Soul
This was the Cairo swimming pool for the community. This is one great big swimming pool, took in this whole perimeter here. This was whites only. Whites only. As a matter of fact, during this period, that's why the white people shut this down, because the blacks were allowed to come in here and swim too. And you see what it is now. It's just your local car wash. But that's what happened here. The blacks had got their rights, the right to do just like anybody else. And your good old white boys that ran the town then said, to hell with you black people, we'll shut her down.
Oh gosh, here we go. I can just remember riding by this swimming pool on the highway and seeing the people swimming in the pool. Of course, I didn't care. I didn't care about swimming or anything, but I just hear so many older people, older black people saying, you know, we weren't allowed to swim there.
This is where I was born. Back then it was called St. Mary's Hospital, and that's right here. That's what's left of it.
St. Mary's Hospital, owned by the Sisters of the Holy Cross, is located at Center and Cedar, and with its $3 million addition fills an entire city block. The Sisters were originally sent to Cairo in 1861 to care for the sick and wounded soldiers of the Civil War.
I was born in the old hospital. I was born there, and I never knew that I would be able to, because everything is knocked down now. I'm like, oh my God, I was born in there.
The hospital. I remember my mom telling me that the black women that had their babies, they would have them up there on the maternity floor and then they were taken to another area. At that time, integration had already come about. So
and they weren't allowed to be on the same floor with their baby.
And they still weren't allowed to be on the same floor. And then the babies were separated in the nursery.
Aww.
And my mom went up to Belleville to the bishop and told him, hey, you better correct this or I will turn you in. Isn't that something? Yeah.
There's no segregation in Cairo. I belong to St. Patrick's Church, and for years we've had Negro parishioners in our church.
All this is poplar. All down through there. All up and down through here was poplar. You can still see it on there. Poplar runs like this. This was the outer edge of Cairo. On the east side was black people. This was poplar. Okay, ran up and down. This in here going this way was your white people. That's your segregation. My remembrance, 68 and before, you could go anywhere. You had no problems, nobody bothered you. There was even a few white people that were still living in certain places then. I remember one in particular lived right down here, Wolfie. I won't give you his last name. His name was Wolfie. Wolfie was my age. I was walking down the street one summer day, 66, 67. I wanted to go play with Wolfie, my buddy. I walked up. Wolfie lived in a two-story house and had a long set of steps on the front porch. I walked up to the porch and I said, Wolfie, what are you doing? Go away. I said, what are you doing in a white dress? Mom's punishing me. Go away. I laughed till I cried. He said, you better not tell nobody. She had put a white dress on this boy and made him sit on the front porch. I like to died. I said, I guess it's better get your ass beat. He said, go away, and he started crying. Don't you tell nobody at school. I said, oh, dear God, man, your mama put it on you. She had him in a pretty white dress. It had lace on it, and by golly, he looked good.
New York Times, April 29th, 2011. Anxious eyes on a river as flooding threat looms. The Corps commander of the Memphis district said, Cairo's defenses can hold up against the pressure for only so long. We are listening to the river. It's now an art, based on science. but it's an art.
Where we stand today, if you want to say politicking-wise, if you start talking about our government, our state government, we don't exist in the state of Illinois when you get past Carbondale and Marion. And we're part of the state, and it's like we're foreigners. It's like we don't exist. It's almost like we've been left behind. President Obama, he made his visit, he came through. But it wasn't on his tour, in his campaign. And he said, well, I won't forget you. Well, I'm not so sure if we still hadn't been forgotten.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So I thought, okay, Mississippi and Ohio, that's where we'll start the quest, and was really surprised to note where the two rivers come together. There's a town called Cairo that I'd never heard of. So I looked it up, and on the first web page I clicked on was Cairo is like a 1920s movie, but all the actors are missing. The city that history has forgotten. There was nothing like this. Civil War, civil rights, this immense amounts of pretty important, interesting things that happened here, but clearly crumbling into dust right now. First night we came here, there were stray dogs roaming the streets, full moon, and the river was up, almost touching the levee wall. We moved here with the intention of having a cheap place to live and being able to do something for the community, because the more we read about Cairo, we realized that there was little opportunity here for kids to have a place to hang out, or for there to be any place for live music other than the bar with the rebel flag in it, that's also 21 and up and has a rebel flag hanging in it. All we want it to be known as is a community space for Cairo, with no political views, no religious views. Because I think they're trying to figure out if we're an anarchist space or something, because we're a collective and not for profit. Then we get people that say they want to come in and do meetings and say they want to use the space, and that's when we're most excited. We tell them they can do anything they want. A very small percentage of this stuff ever happens. So for the most part, I think people accept us as a little bit strange for this town. We heard a rumor, and it's just a rumor, that the middle school, I think, librarian told kids not to come here because we might be evil. Their biggest fear right now is that the community doesn't really need what we're offering. And then if that's the case, we don't think our future is very long here.
In the industry, the Mississippi River, we divide into the upper and the lower, this being the dividing point. One barge is basically 60 trucks. One barge is 15 train cars. We'll push 40 barges south, so that's 2,400 trucks. We're taking off the road, burning fuel like crazy with one boat taking a tow.
River traffic is the cheapest way to send goods and services throughout the United States. And I think that will become even more important as we get greener, and as that we start looking to save energy farther into the future. Cairo will have a role to play in that. And so there will be jobs in Cairo, not necessarily for the residents, possibly for people from out of the area that are commuting there. And possibly in the long term, a rebound for Cairo again, but not necessarily as a residential community that people once remember and saw it.
If I were an industrialist, I would see this bowl of flood wall, protected area, as one of the most desirable industrial sites in the country. It's just too bad there's people living in there. That's a cynical view. But just like New Orleans, some people said after Katrina, tear it down. It's not worth saving. Well, you can't go to New Orleans and look at New Orleans and say it should be torn down. I mean, that's an incredible history. Well, Cairo's is just a tiny little New Orleans in my mind. So you got Magnolia Manor, River Lord, and St. Mary's Park, and you've got General Grant, and you've got Lewis and Clark, and you've got the Illinois Central Railroad history, and you've got the steamboat history. You can't tear Cairo down. So there's a conflict between the history and the industrialist. Western Union office, the telegraph office, was right here. And so this alley that we're looking at between the Booter House and the Board of Trade was where the high school kids, I call them high school kids, I'm sure they were, teenagers, that rode their bicycles and delivered telegrams all over the city. This is where they hung out. On this wall are scratched the names of these young kids, 1936, 1938. If this building was torn down, all the boys in Cairo from 1930 to 1950 would be in a dump somewhere.
If you see downtown, we've had a lot of demolitions down there, and we still got a ways to go to try to restore that area, all these abandoned buildings, which is an eyesore. And to attract business and things, you have to have something that looks halfway decent. Nobody's attracted to anything ugly. So what we do, if I'm expecting somebody to come to my house, I clean up. So that's what we want to do to the city. And so that's where we are. And we're trying, we won't give up. My motto is never give up. This is Cairo, the city of hope.
Los Angeles Times, May 1st, 2011. Flooded Illinois town evacuates. With forecasts calling for heavy rain and thunderstorms, some residents said the fate of Cairo was up to a higher power than the Army Corps of Engineers. It's in God's hands right now, said Carlin Bennett, Mississippi County's presiding commissioner.
Terrible thing to watch a town die every day. They talk about the stores downtown and the civil rights part of it and the racial problems that we had. Those stores downtown were all owned by individual people. And those people always wanted their children to have better than they did. And they sacrificed and gave them the opportunity to get away from Cairo. And so when the parents died, the stores closed because there was nobody else to run. People come in and say, what's happened in your community? I get so tired of standing at that desk and answering that question. And I explain it the same way I just explained it to you, is that people left the community and did not allow for the maintenance or the perseverance of the building. I take no prisoners. You ask me what I think, I'll tell you what I think. When people come to my community and they show the harshness and the realities that we live with every day and don't show the positives like this or the Customs House or Magnolia Manor or parks or beautiful homes, I get very frustrated because I live and work here every day for my community because I love Cairo.
Peaceful, small. It's small. Everybody know everybody. Everybody friendly. If you walk to the corner and cars ride past, cars gonna wave and blow at you and everything like they've been doing. I mean, I like the atmosphere.
There's no place like Cairo. I can't explain it to you. There are so many good people in this community. Even though there's less than 3,000 people here, all of them, black or white, either one, there are many, many good people here.
Mostly what we get is catfish and buffalo. And this area here is your ribs, which is your big long bones. But most of a buffalo is all the little bitty fine bones. Just like you're from England. How do you know where that fish lived before you caught him? You can tell all them tales you want to tell, but you have no idea where he was living. He could have lived all of his life in the Mississippi and just happened to swim 19 miles up the Ohio the day he got caught. Now, I think fish are just like anything. Some people stay in one spot. Some coyotes live in one area the whole time. And some coyotes, when they mark them, travel 20, 30, 40 miles in a day. I don't know where them fish live. Ain't nobody but God knows where they lived before they got caught.
the rivers run into each other. So.
And well, not just the rivers, everything runs together. Most of your backwaters and everything runs together, especially when the water's up. There ain't any water that don't connect when the water's up. So how do you figure?
If you think about it, any big city is where there's water or a source of water. And as far as the prehistoric people, they always met where rivers came together. And this was a meeting spot. And from the east and the west, they all met here. It's almost like a magnet. It attracted them. Once they came here, they never left. They stayed here till something ran them out. And I'd say the rivers are what did that.
It just cracks me up. This town, if it weren't for people on welfare, the grocery store we have now would be out of business. Because people that have money are going to go to Walmart and stuff. Only people that are stuck really buying the majority of stuff from these places are either on welfare or don't have a vehicle to jump in and run over there. Because I tell them all the time, you ought to treat people better, because if there was some reason welfare was cut off, that store would sink.
Years ago, when the river used to freeze over all the time, and there was an ice house in Cairo. The walls were 8 foot thick and they were filled with sawdust. And Harry and Finus Hall, they would take a team of mules and go out on the river when it froze over and it would get so thick. And they'd put cleats on the bottom of the mules' feet so they could walk on that ice. And they would take an ice saw and saw blocks of ice out and then hook onto them with a pair of tongs and drag them up to the bank, and they'd put ice in that ice house. And I asked Harry one time, how long would that last? And he said they'd have ice, they'd do that in the wintertime, and they'd have ice in that ice house till August. He couldn't have told you how many teams of mules and horses were lost in that river, where they'd hook onto a chunk of ice, and it would be too heavy for them to get out, and the current would take the ice under, and it'd drag the horses under too. That's why they couldn't get everybody to do it.
Well, in the 95 flood and the 93 flood, the Mississippi was flooded, but the Ohio wasn't. This last year, both of them were flooded. Cairo wasn't nothing but a 4 foot above water on both sides of it. And I thought about that, boy, if one of them levees bust, that whole place would be history.
You know I want to go to Cairo, but the water's all over.
Just a peninsula is all it was.
You know I want to go to Cairo, but the water's all over town.
If you drove through there and seen it, as far as you could see both ways was water.
Keep all these thieves on the corner, don't lie nobody round.
Cairo has never flooded since they built the flood wall.
The gal love, and she got
The
washed
1937 flood, the water was at record high, 59-something feet.
God I love, she got washed
Cairo
away.
was like an island in this huge, huge area of water.
Well, now since she been gone, you know I got nowhere to
Ohio was 60 miles wide or more.
That has to be rough on the levees. They were tested, definitely.
Cairo was really, really blooming. I was just a little girl, but they had all kind of groups used to come through, like the Oldest Ready and all Sam Cooke and B.B. King, all those people used to come through Cairo years and years ago. But this was a very pop. People far and wide used to come here. This was the place. This was the place.
What about that group from high school that time?
Oh, the Soul Phonics. Yeah, the Soul Phonics. Those guys were from Cairo. They were really good.
There was, I think, 4 boys, and in the basement of this house had a studio, and it's still there. I can show it to you if you'd like. Recording studio of the Solophonics. This modern reel-to-reel that was modern in '69. And there's their collection. I left it down here undisturbed. I was hoping to get one of the brothers to come back, but I'm sure there's some interesting stuff on these tapes that somebody... Here you go. Solophonics. Remarkable because the time that they lived here was also the time that they had all the riots in Cairo. They were having fire bombings in Cairo, and I was on the fire department, and we would have fires. I'd be called in, and I would leave in one car to go to the fire, and some of these young men that lived here would get in the car or come back in here from. So I mean, they might have been a part of the other side of the page. Today, we're still real good friends, and I remember them as kids standing on the front porch, bouffant hairdos, and their polyester suits that they wore, and I could hear the loud music because they practiced down here.
Solophonics played top 40 R&B, soul, jazz, blues.
A little blues, yeah. But I was one of the first young ladies in that group. We had it going on. We was popular, everybody loved us, you know, and we were singing Cairo and vicinity, and we did a lot of the old songs like from the Temptations and Diana Ross, Al Green, and all of them,
This town is so different now than it was then. It's not like it was. It's people get along. But people are still afraid to come here because they see black people walking up down the street, and it's no problem. I mean, they're just people that want to live their lives in Cairo. Not by they choose to live here because it's a good place to live. It really is.
I said my name is Tracy, and I want to be a basketball player, and Cairo gonna lead me there.
My name is Alton, and I want to be a football player.
My name is Taquisha, and I want to be a judge.
Little things are just popping up. We're making progress. We're not regressing, we're progressing. You know, I have a good team. I have a think tank. I like to use the word think tank. Now we're working on Put Illinois to Work thing. This is through the state. Employees can hire people, and we pay them $10 an hour, but it doesn't cost the city anything. The state picks up the tab for us.
A lot of times we always complain about jobs and stuff, so they try to give us a little chance. It's nice though. It's a nice experience. We was at the park tearing up the grass stuff that go on top. It ain't supposed to re-root at the bottom, but we had to tear that up. It's like landscaping. That's a little experience for that too. Y'all silly.
Okay, hold up.
And it's the generation of children that you see coming up, because there's enough bright kids there, and there's enough bright people, and there are enough people who care about the community. But the educational system is not there, the healthcare system is not there. All of the things that create the cushion to build on. You can't get out of the rut.
What we have for such a small school, we have a lot of talent here, a lot of everything here, singers, basketball, sports. It's a lot down here, but you know, it's just nothing to spread it out or get it, that to get it to go somewhere else, it's just a lot of wasted potential, basically, after a while, just wasted potential. All right, the name of this poem is What Cairo Means to Me, wrote in 2007, and my name is Byron Madison Jr. Cairo means calamity in what was once a majestic town, which caused it to fall apart, its buildings to crumble down. It is a place of opportunity, but only if that is what you seek. We as students have already started with our academic leaps. Cairo means a challenge that all individuals here can take to compel this city to rise again, even over its previous peak.
How would you describe the present situation here in Cairo? I'd say it's rather explosive.
The Guardian, May 3rd, 2011. Engineers have blown up a levee in the U.S. Midwest, hoping to save a historic town from destruction by raging floodwaters, but condemning a vast expanse of rich agricultural farmland. The decision, which has been fiercely contested in the courts, set a fading town of mainly African American residents against relatively well-off farmers. Making this decision is not easy or hard, the commander of the Army Corps told reporters. It's simply grave.
For all the money that's been spent there, for all the programs that have been funded by the state and federal government and so on, the sense of hopelessness and helplessness just in the end wins out over all of it. And that's the real sad story of Cairo. It has the history to become a tourist point of some great magnitude. Cairo was a part of the national picture. Lincoln could not find a general to fight in the Civil War. And he finally picks Ulysses Grant. And Grant becomes the general of the Army of Tennessee, which is the Northern Army that trained in Cairo, brought all of these forces together in Cairo, volunteers, to form this army. So in the purest sense, Cairo was the jumping off point for the one great battle of this country that decided the Civil War. And everything depended upon Grant because Lee was beating the tar out of the Union Army out east. Grant opened up the Mississippi for supplies and everything else to the north, and it all started in Cairo, Illinois. And yet, Cairo didn't change. Isn't that ironic to you? It is to me.
I couldn't think of living anywhere else right now. Even I say to my son, all right, well, where would you want to live? I mean, where would you rather be? And they're really, I've been all over the country. I've been in a home of billionaires. I didn't feel anything so special about being in this elaborate, beautiful home. Whatever you can share with other people that you've got is so important to connect. I think that's the problem today. We don't connect on a human level. Cairo brings that connection for me, because it's a lot of nature. There's a lot of open spaces and the rivers, the Ohio and the Mississippi.
New York Times, May 3rd, 2011. River level drops after blast at levee. By 6 a.m. Tuesday, the water level had fallen to 59 feet. For now at least, Cairo appears to be safe.
When a boat comes down the river from either direction, they will stop and they'll get a special pilot. And he gets on the boat and he takes over. Whatever he says goes. And he is special. His only specialty is making this turn down here because the currents are so strong and so different. Get on the boat, make the turn, and go probably 15 or 20 miles up there. Then he gets off, and a little boat will come up and get him. And then when they're coming down the other way, same thing. About 20 miles up, this guy will get on that you've never seen before. He won't say a word. Never said a word to me. And they make the turn, and it's very dangerous down here. And that is zero. That's point zero right there. Everything starts right there.
People always say, you know, we have to come back to Cairo, we want to come back to Cairo. It's in the water. If you drink the water here, you'll come back.
Population, I think, will come back up. It's a lot of people have said they wanted to come back home. People that left from here and want to come back home, but they need something to come back home to.
I hear grown people say they don't never want to come back to Cairo. Cairo is not a good place to stay. That's what all grown people say, so I don't, but I really like it.
And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. Do you remember the gunshots at night?
No.
You were too young.
Yeah.
There was so much tension back then, and
I don't remember any of it.
it was just I remember it. And now, I think everybody's like, we're all we have left, you know? And so, I mean, everybody gets along now.
Yeah.
Master told me one day I find peace in every way, but inside